Welcome back to Dream It, Build It, Make It. I'm so excited to have you here again today. If you're new, welcome. If you're an old hat and you've been here a while, I appreciate you tuning in. Dream It, Build It, Make It is where we're talking to some of the leaders in customer experience and how they're changing the game for their customers today. I'm your host, Michael Heward, manager of content marketing here at Iterable, and I'm very excited today to bring a European tint to Dream It, Build It, Make It, something we haven't done before. But it's very exciting, and I'm joined by a member of the curly hair crew, Mick Rigby, CEO and founder at Yodel Mobile. Welcome, Mick. Thanks so much for coming.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you, Michael. Thank you very much for the time and the opportunity. Yes, I'm European, but I'm a citizen of the world.
I like that. I think we all should be.
Exactly.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. And my first question should just be the one that everyone asks. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, actually. I'm actually just about to go on holiday. So underneath the shirts, I've got the swimming shorts and the flip-flops on.
Oh, you're ready to go. I wish I was in that position right now. Well, to start us off, I love asking my guests. Well, actually, first, before I even get into that, I should ask, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And what you're doing at Yodel Mobile?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm the founder and CEO of Yodel Mobile. We're a full service app growth marketing agency. We've been doing this since 2006. So we've got a huge amount of experience. And my background is sort of mainstream advertising and strategy. And then 2006, as I say, we kind of sort of fell into what was the nascent mobile space, and then the app space when that really started to take off.
Oh, so you got in right at the beginning of the app space, huh?
Yeah, we were pretty much the first. We were pretty much the first, certainly in the UK and across Europe. But yeah, we've seen it all. We saw the launch of the iPhone, and then sort of the advent of the App Store, the first MMPs that came along. So yeah, a huge wealth of experience, and yeah, you probably could tell by the amount of gray hair I've got.
I mean, I'm catching up quickly. You can't see it at the moment. I got a whole string in the middle.
Yeah,
that's really cool. That's a great time to jump in. So I'm curious. I'm trying to maybe add this as a new section of the show. But what was that kind of aha moment that led to you founding Yodel Mobile?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I guess it probably wasn't an aha moment because there was no real app business at the time, and it was I was running another business, and one of my old clients had left, and then he phoned me up about a week later and said, "Look, I'm just starting working on this." It was a .wap app. I don't know if you guys remember that, but you know, on Nokia phones. And he's like, "Look, I don't know where to turn to. Can you guys help?" So, you know, yeah, it was a case of trying to find somebody in the digital sphere that could help him, and there was nobody out there that knew it. So I just rolled my sleeves up and said, "Yeah, okay, let's give it a go." And that was it. We kind of fell into the space. Not that there was anything to fall into at the time.
Well, I feel like that's the way that most people fall into something they find for a long time. That's pretty cool.
I'd love to say it was foresight, and we knew that this mobile and app thing was going to be huge, but it wasn't.
I think you just own it. Just make it your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Scrub that from now on in. Yeah, I had the foresight. Okay.
I'll cut that out. So I like to ask my guests, just because despite us all generally working in marketing, or most of my guests work in marketing, we're consumers too. And so to you, what is a good customer experience? Like, what are the features of good customer experience? What do you really look for in your buying journey? And are there any brands that you think are just doing it super, super well right now?
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, coming at it from a consumer perspective rather than an app. I think, do you know what? I think businesses, I mean, this day and age, there's more choice than we have ever had. There's more brands out there. There's more experiences out there. So, I mean, looking after your customers is absolutely essential, because if it's not going to be you, it will be somebody else. So I think, if you get a customer who is really interested in what you are doing, then you've got to nurture them. If you do not nurture them, you will lose them. And I think a good customer experience business understands what the user's there for. Why have they chosen you over somebody else, A over B, and what makes that journey as easy for them and as relevant for them as possible. Shows them or me as a customer consumer that I'm valued. And I think you mentioned what kind of brands do it well, and what kind of, maybe what brand experiences, for instance. So to me, when you take the lids off a bottle of seltzer or pop, and you get that, that is an incredible experience, because what that does is it buys into your historical experience of that particular brand or related brands, and it gives you that feeling of anticipation and delight. So that to me is an amazing customer experience relationship. And I think also things like the warmth of a waiter when you go to a restaurant, and they can set the tone. If they sit you down and have a genuine interest in you and what your guests are going to be doing for that evening, and make you feel comfortable, that sets the tone for the next couple of hours. And you're off on the right foot. That customer isn't necessarily going to complain and moan as much if there is an issue. They're going to accept what comes to them and enjoy that particularly more. So setting the tone at the start of the experience, I think, is really, really important.
I really like two things you said there. First is that if it's not you, it's going to be someone else. So there is really that plethora of choices now, and you almost get that paralysis of choice where you're going to choose probably the brand that or have experience with or have a review of. So it's really important to make sure that everyone has a good experience. So if someone has to choose, they likely have heard something good about your brand. And then the second is that crisp pop sound. I think I read some recently about auditory responses to marketing and stuff like that. And I think we often forget just like the association you can have with your product. And I think that's a really important aspect of the customer experience, is to really lean into that and make sure that shines through. I love that answer. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's, sorry to add to that, but it's about distilling the essence of what that particular business's customers want to feel. And when certainly if you're looking at the app space, and what are they going to experience the app? Because most apps tend to be providing a functional functional activity. But if you can wrap that up by creating an experience around it, a positive experience, that will stand you out from the crowd, and that it's a hugely crowded market.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you bring up functioning, because I was going to ask you about this later, but let's bring it forward. So how does the function of an app change the way consumers interact with it? Like, say if there's an e-commerce app, or if it's more informative, educational, or if it's kind of sending customers to a mobile site, like how does the function of the app change that experience?
Yeah, really, that's really interesting. And you're right. I mean, do you want to build up a relationship with an app business that is providing you with your insurance? You probably only want to be connecting with that insurance app, every 12 months, 6 months at a push. Whereas if that app is helping guide you through, your areas of interest and hobbies, for instance, or your social life, you're probably going to be interacting with that app every day, if not quite a few times a day. So really sort of understanding your customer and your consumer, and what and why and how they're going to use your business really sort of comes to the forefront. And I think a lot of app businesses are really, really bad at asking their customers why. Why have you come here? Why do you want to use this? They can track the user through the app and see where they're falling out, but they perhaps don't really understand why. And I think if you are going to succeed, certainly in the app space, probably in any other business where you are, a B2C offering is really understand what your consumers want, ask them the questions, research, you know, qualitative research groups, ask them all those questions as often as you can, because there's always going to be some insights. And if you, once you understand that, you can then build up that bespoke journey that they're expecting when they come to the app space.
Yeah. Contextualize it for their lifestyle and make sure that you're fitting in that lifestyle rather than making sure that they fit in yours. I think that's a great way to go about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you said it really well there.
Yeah, I try. Sometimes I get it right. So what does the addition of an app really do for a brand's digital transformation and their customer experience? But I think in particular right now, kind of fingers crossed towards the end of the pandemic, brands are being forced to go more mobile. So kind of what does a lot of brands don't necessarily have an app at the moment, or they had just started with one. So what does that initial addition of an app as a channel or as a function or a feature really do for that digital transformation?
Yeah, I mean, another really sort of interesting area to explore there. I think, you know, I think businesses, there's a tendency for businesses to go down that app route because their competitors are doing it, you know, and, you know, again, it's coming back to trying to sort of define the reason. And, you know, as a business, what the app space, it's a double-edged sword. So apps give the user a more convenient and portable experience. You know, you can pull out your phone anywhere and you can access that app pretty much anywhere, and then you can do whatever that app is providing you, that service. But as I say, it's a double-edged sword. The problem or the issue with apps is that you have to strip out a lot of stuff to simplify the process. You've got a very small screen. You've got somebody that potentially could be walking whilst they're doing this. You know, it has to be a relatively simple journey. And therefore you have to really sort of understand how you're going to make what you do relevant in that small space. But there's a really good quote from Winston Churchill. And he says, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. And this is a letter that he was actually sending to one of his friends. And that, to me, sums it all up. Is, you know, on a web page, you know, or even in a store, you know, you've got massive amounts of real estate. You can say what you want, you can show what you want, you know, and the consumer can get around that and make their choices. When you're in the app, you know, you don't have as much real estate. You've got a very small screen, and you've got a user that wants to get to where they want to be within that app to do what it's going to do for them relatively quickly. So the real hard work is actually distilling how to go through all that process to come to the nub of why those individuals are there and give it to them in a very simple and smart and trustworthy way.
I like that. Yeah. And you were talking about the double-edged sword. Are there any kind of misconceptions about apps that you think just people have right now that need to be debunked, and they need to stop thinking that?
Yeah, do you know what? Because I mean, the app space is booming, you know, and we are all using more apps than we've ever done before, and invariably it means that we're using less, you know, websites. You know, we're purchasing through the internet rather than, you know, going out to the shops all the time. You know, so you know, the environment is all set for success. You know, it's like, wow, everything's going great in the app space, and it is. But the problem is, around 99% of all apps fail. Now, that's a stat. You know, it might be 98, it might be 9.9, but it's a fact. You know, the vast majority of apps are downloaded less than 2,000 times. You know, so bringing an app to the market does not mean by a long shot that what you've brought to the market is going to succeed. It takes a lot of hard work to do that. You need a product that works. You need a product that the consumers want. You need a good team around you, because mistakes are going to be hugely costly. You need the right funds to do it. If you're getting into the app space, you need to really know what your competitors are doing, arguably what they're spending, and you need, at the very basis, need to be able to match that. And the final piece for success in the app space is luck. You know, you can put everything together, but you might get featured by Apple, for instance, or you might get a mention by Kanye West, you know, and boom, life's a joy. But if you don't, then it's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And you mentioned being featured by Apple, and I know like commission was a hot topic, especially in the last year, I think it was. What are your advice? What's your advice to brands who are starting from scratch from building their app, or they're pretty early on in the growth stage? What's your advice for kind of handling that and kind of, I guess you said, balancing it against putting resources into their app?
Yeah, absolutely. I think set your expectations is the first thing. Set your boss's expectation, if it's not your app and your work, you know, you're working in a team there, to what is achievable, and make sure you have the funds to be able to do that, and be very careful with those funds. I mentioned it just before. It's really easy to make mistakes, and those mistakes can be hugely costly and set you off track for what your objectives and your targets are and how you're going to achieve them. So, you know, I think using the right people, whether that's internally or externally, to get an agency on board to help, I think is super important. You know, there are a massive amount of pitfalls out there that you can fall down. And, you know, it can set back your app journey by 2 or 3 years, because arguably you could do something, you know, present it to the board, and the board, let's say, well, that didn't work, so we're going to scrap the app, you know. So, you know, take that journey very carefully, look at what others have done, manage those funds carefully, bring some expertise into your team that have been through this and launched apps before, for instance, in order to be able to try and maximize the chance of your success.
Yeah, make sure you've done the due diligence beforehand.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also be very reactive to what's going to happen in the market, because, you know, something's going to happen. You're going to, you know, it's like you know, you lay the plans down for a battle, and as soon as the first shot has been fired, all those plans go out the window. So, you know, be wise to the fact that things are going to change, and then you therefore need to make quick decisions to change in accordance to what's actually happening out there that's right in front of you.
Yeah. No, I like that. Make sure you're able to go on the fly. And I think part of that comes into like the architecture of the app and what you're putting into it and what kind of data you're bringing into it or collecting through it. So can you give a quick rundown of the data architecture that goes into app growth and management in particular? And what are some of the tools brands should be utilizing, whether that's like a CDP or some other data storage platform?
Yeah, I mean, a really good question. Again, I think, you know, I think the app space, which is the space obviously I work in, is probably one of the most data-rich environments you're ever going to get, and that's brilliant, because it allows you, if you have that right kind of information, it allows you to make the decisions that you need to make about the product, about where you're going to spend your money, your advertising dollar, what, you know, what your users are doing within the app, and therefore what are the features that are more relevant to them. So the two most important things, I think, are firstly your attribution analytics, so to really understand where those people are, where those individuals are coming from to download the app, because that's where you can then focus your effort and your money. You know, it could be organic, it could be influencers, it could be paid advertising on Google or Facebook, for instance, but you need to know that. And then the second most important thing is the in-app analytics, to understand how people are using the app, what they're doing, what the drop-off points are, where the sticking points are, how long they're spending in certain areas, because that gives you a picture of two things. One is your product and the functions. The second is your marketing and where you need to be, where those junctures are, where you need to get a ping, so you understand that you need to then communicate with them either at that point or at a later date to bring them back into that area of interest. So attribution analytics and in-app analytics are essential. Make sure the two speak together. So make sure that they integrate. So if you choose an apps flower and adjust for your attribution, make sure you've got, an iterable or a mixed panel that also connects with them. And there are a lot of tools out there, and I think as a if you are in the marketplace to understand and put together the right data, the right data information package architecture together, then go and speak to the best players in the market, yourselves being one of them, because you've got a huge amount of experience and understanding, and the businesses out there that are going to utilize you and some of your competitors need to really sort of understand and dig deep to see where the advantages and the opportunities lie.
It's a fascinating place to start with attribution. Is that something you feel like a lot of brands are kind of not necessarily dropping the ball on, but they could be stronger in? Is that typically a place where you see a bit of a weakness?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, even now, we still get businesses that we're talking to that haven't really considered the proper attribution tools beyond maybe Firebase, which is a free tool. And don't get me wrong, Firebase does a job, but really, if you're going to try and do the best for your app business, you really need to be able to go beyond what something like Firebase can do. So, I mean, we would not recommend any app business spending $1 on advertising without a proper MMP attribution tool within their app, because 80%, 70% of what you're spending would be, you wouldn't get the right kind of information, basically.
Makes sense. You saying 70% kind of pinged this back in my mind. When I was doing some research, I found a stat on your site that said 70% of apps are deleted within 30 days. So I'm curious about like LTV and retention, how that fits into the app growth journey, and how do you kind of, when you're speaking to brands that are in their app growth journey, where's your recommendation on prioritization between acquisition and retention?
Yeah, well, so if you cannot retain your users in your app, you do not have an app business. And that stat is, 70% is a scary stat, because if you think about it, 70% of every dollar that you spend, or every $100,000 or every $1 million you spend on acquiring users is going to be wasted after 30 days. Now, if you can retain those users, then obviously it doesn't become 70%, it becomes 30% or 20% or even 10% is arguably wasted. And therefore, you do actually have a viable business around those kind of figures. So retention is absolutely essential. And I would always say, we used to say a lot, you flip the funnel in the app space, you flip the funnel. So rather than focusing on acquisition, get the retention right. If you can get that right, you can then flip it back and then start spending money, spending time and effort, utilizing your owned and earned media to bring people to the app, because you're keeping them, you're building a relationship with them, and you're nurturing them, and they're becoming a good supportive customer of you as a business.
Building a relationship. It's definitely something I've seen a lot in building content out for Iterable. It's always about that long-term relationship that you can have with the customer versus just a quick hit. That's
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it could cost you $5-10 just to get a download. Yeah. That's not a registered user. So if you do get them, and bring them in, they will become a valuable long-term customer of you as a business.
Yeah, and also goes back to that contextualizing in their lifestyle. It's all coming full circle.
Oh yeah.
So I like to close these out with a look towards the future. So I'm curious, what is your kind of outlook for the future of apps and app growth, and how you see brands maybe adapting to that, or kind of what's happening now that you think will last long? So what do you think is the future of apps essentially? Let's leave it as simpler.
Give me a big target to fire at there.
Exactly.
Yeah, do you know what? It's a great space to be in. I think consumers, we are using, I mentioned that earlier, we're using more apps than we've ever done before. We're not, it's a sector of the digital space that's growing faster than anywhere else. And also we have a younger generation of people coming through, 16, 17, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds now that, arguably are going to the app space before they go to a digital or internet environment. So it's only going that way. What I love about the space is, there are businesses like yours that are coming to the space with a technical and very smart way of doing things and providing the service that a lot of businesses and marketeers need. And that again is only going to grow. Your businesses get more smarter and smarter, and we as marketeers are able to utilize that smart stuff that you're doing, and provide a service to the clients and the app base and the app businesses out there that are utilizing it. And the fact is, Apple make a huge amount of money. Google make a huge amount of money from their app stores. It's not going to go away. They're going to continue to support those particular channels, and therefore provide the tools, provide the access to any business that wants to get into it to try and succeed. So it's going to continue to grow. The amount of investment that's going into the app space is phenomenal. We've never seen it as big as this. And again, it will continue to grow. So it's a fantastic place to be. And for anybody that is involved, the future arguably is going to be quite rosy as long as you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. So what you're saying is I should get into app development.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, you and a million other businesses.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe I'll just stick where I'm at. Well, Mick, thank you so much for this. This was a fantastic chat. I've learned a ton. I hope all of our listeners are sticking through it and can learn as much as well. If any of our viewers do have any questions, how can they find you or reach out to you?
Yeah. Oh, great. So so the company's Yodel Mobile. That's YODEL mobile.com. There you come to our website. There's a lot of info on there. There's if you need any more information through that site, then you can click on the box there. You can get a hold of me at mick@yodelmobile.com or info@yodelmobile.com. That goes to the wider team. We've got our Twitter stream at Yodel Mobile. We've got our Facebook page, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Mick Rigby.
Awesome. I'll put all those links in the description below, and everyone will they'll be able to reach you any way possible.
Absolutely. No problem at all. I've really enjoyed it, Michael. Thanks very much. And thanks for getting up early in California to speak to me over here in the UK.
My pleasure. A great way to start a day. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate it. To the rest of you, thanks so much for joining. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one.